Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the mountains, to a place where the air smells like dust and forgotten memories, and the silence presses in thicker than fog. This one's about an old house perched on a lonely ridge, a house that was supposed to be empty. But the thing is, some places don't stay abandoned, not really. And this house, well, it noticed me. Noticing it, you probably won't make it out of this one either. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. So let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It started like most of my trips do. Quiet rental car, thermos of burnt coffee, then a folded up state map, stained with fingerprints and Sharpie notes. I was somewhere in the Appalachians, 2 hours past cell service, heading toward a town so small it barely showed up on GPS. A dot called Bryson's Hollow. Population maybe. My job, officially, is historical documentation. Unofficially, I photograph dying things, old barns, factory ruins, half-sunken cabins, places that still hold on to some memory of what they were, even after the people are long gone. I do freelance work for preservation societies and obscure publications that still care about architectural ghosts. It's not glamorous, but it's peaceful. Usually, I'd heard about the Holloway house from an archivist friend who knew my taste for the forgotten and mildly cursed. According to him, it was a massive Victorian mansion built sometime in the 1890s, perched on a narrow ridge just north of town. Never finished, never fully lived in, officially condemned in 1972, still standing, a classic red flag. But I missed it. Chalk it up to caffeine and curiosity. When I got to Bryson's Hollow, the town was barely more than a curve in the road. A diner, a post office that looked abandoned, and a bait shop with hand-painted signage. I parked beside the diner, the tires crunching on gravel, and stepped into the sort of quiet that makes your ears ring. I asked about the Holloway place inside, trying not to sound too much like an outsider. The woman behind the counter was wiping down a mug, even though it looked clean already. She didn't look up. "Don't go up there," she said, almost before I finished the question. "No trail," said a man in a corner booth, without looking at me. "Not anymore." Another waitress brought out a plate of fries and muttered, "It's not empty." I laughed, softly, nervously. Right, that's the idea. No one laughed with me. It's strange, but the moment I stepped out of that diner, I knew I wouldn't be welcome back. Not just socially. I mean something deeper than that. Like the town had already washed its hands of me. Still, I found the trail. It was overgrown and twisting. A deer path at best, but it pulled upward toward the ridge. Everything in that forest seemed to lean away from it. The wind, the birds, even the light. It all bent away, like the house was a bruise on the land. I hiked for about 45 minutes, slipping once on loose gravel and cutting my palm. I wrapped it in an old bandana and kept going. A part of me thought maybe the town had spread those rumors to keep people out. Some places have a mythos like that, but as I climbed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just going toward the house. It was coming toward me. The first glimpse was through the trees, a dark silhouette rising against the gray sky, like something carved from coal. Steep gables, a widow's walk crumbling at the top, long windows like empty eyes. When I reached the clearing, it stood there fully revealed, looming and oddly intact. The porch sagged, but hadn't collapsed. Ivy choked the lower walls, and all the paint had long peeled away, leaving the boards silvery with weather rot. But the front door, closed, undisturbed, like someone had just stepped out for groceries, and might be back any minute. I took my first photo from about 10 paces out. I always take one before entering. Some kind of instinct, like marking my place in case I get turned around. When I looked at the screen, something strange caught my eye. In the upper window, I thought I saw. No, it was probably just a trick of reflection, but I stepped up to the porch and tested the wood. It groaned, but held. The front door had a glass pane smeared with decades of grime. I pushed it open, slow and creaking, and the smell hit me. Wood rot, mold, and something faintly metallic. Inside, it was dust-layered and dead quiet. A grand staircase led upward like a spine, its banister broken in one place. On the left was a parlor, furniture draped with yellowing sheets. On the right, a dining room, where chairs lay, toppled like a fight had once taken place and never been cleaned up. I unpacked my gear and began documenting. Click, flash, scribbled notes. The light shifted through broken blinds, making everything look underwater. In the foyer, I found an old coat still hanging on a hook. Brown wool, heavy, moth-eaten. Beneath it, a pair of scuffed leather boots, still lined up, still facing the door. I should have stopped there, should have taken the hint. Instead, I turned my lens upstairs. The hallway was lined with closed doors. I started with the nearest, a bedroom, with a rotting canopy bed, the mattress sunken like something had slept there too long. Second door, a bathroom. The mirror over the sink had a long vertical crack through it, like lightning frozen in glass. Third door, a nursery, empty crib, dust on the mobile, a toy horse with one eye missing. Then I saw the final door, at the end of the hall. It was different, heavy, oak, reinforced with rusted metal bands and wrapped in iron chains, real ones, padlocked in 2 places. Someone had wanted this door sealed, not just closed, contained. And from behind it, I thought I heard something shift, not loudly, just enough, like someone standing up, like something remembering how to breathe. I backed away, suddenly aware of how alone I was, how high up on that ridge, how the forest outside had gone completely silent. My throat felt dry, my fingers tingled, and somewhere far below, in the empty belly of the house, a floorboard creaked, slow, like a footstep dragging across it. I didn't run. I wanted to. I really did. But something about that house had a grip on me already. Not physical, not yet. Just a kind of gravity, like when you're walking along a high ledge and your body tips ever so slightly forward, not because you want to fall, but because some buried part of you needs to know what it would feel like. The door with the chain still loomed behind me, and the air in that hallway had a weight to it, thick, humid, and faintly sweet, like something was rotting beneath the floorboards, but trying very hard to smell like flowers. I told myself the house was shifting, old beams, wind. Do you know how it is? Sometimes the mind will start playing tricks on you if you give it too much silence. Classic excuse, right? I went back downstairs, trying to keep it casual, took a few more shots of the parlor. The light was decent. Late afternoon, sun filtering through the cracked glass, catching motes of dust like golden snow. If you squinted, you could almost pretend it was peaceful. Almost. I stepped onto the back porch and took a deep breath. The view stretched out behind the house. Thick trees, heavy with shadows, and that same stubborn silence. No birdsong, no wind, just the distant hum of insects, like static leaking from the edge of the world. I set up camp inside just before dusk. I figured I'd sleep in the living room, away from the weirdness upstairs, and head back down to town first thing in the morning. But when I looked at the photo I'd taken earlier from the clearing, I noticed something new. In the second floor window, that same dark smudge I'd dismissed earlier, it was sharper now, human-shaped, a little too tall, pressed close to the glass. I zoomed in. It wasn't just looking out, it was looking down at me. I locked my camera screen and set it aside, told myself it was glare, distortion, anything but what it actually was. Sleep didn't come easy. I unrolled my sleeping bag on a spot of floor that looked mostly intact and used my backpack as a pillow. The fireplace had long since gone cold, but I sat beside it anyway, pretending the brick offered some kind of safety. The sun dipped behind the ridge, shadows stretched like claws through the broken blinds. I left one lantern on, just one, soft, battery-powered, casting a puddle of amber light that didn't quite reach the corners of the room. That was my mistake. I should have turned them all on. Somewhere after midnight, I heard the wind, except there was no wind. It started soft, just a low exhale, like someone sighing nearby, but it came from everywhere at once, from the broken vent above, from the cracked window beside me, from the fireplace I'd been leaning against, like the house was breathing. I sat up, listened. Another sound now, upstairs, not a creak, a step, deliberate, then another, slow, careful, pacing. You know that feeling when you're trying not to wake someone up, so you walk heel to toe, real gentle. That's what it sounded like, except it wasn't avoiding waking anyone up. It was trying not to be noticed. I stayed perfectly still, only my eyes moved. The ceiling groaned faintly above. One long dragging shift. Something passed from one room to another, light-footed, but heavy in presence, and then silence again. But that was worse, because now I had to guess where it had stopped, guess if it had seen me, guess if it was still standing there, right above the living room, toes curled over the floorboards, head tilted sideways, listening. My breathing slowed until I could barely hear it. I don't think I blinked for a full minute. The lantern beside me flickered, just once, then held steady. I lay back down slowly, 1 inch at a time, not because I felt safer lying flat, but because I didn't want to make noise. I stared at the ceiling, my chest rising in shallow increments. Eventually the pacing started again, quieter now, as if it had retreated back toward the end of the hall, toward the chain door. The creaking stopped. That was the last sound I heard that night, not because the house went still, but because I must have fallen asleep, somehow, the kind of sleep that comes not from relaxation, but from sheer exhaustion, like my brain gave up before my body did. To when I woke, the light had shifted again, early morning gray, not sunrise, just before it, that weird timeless hour when the world hasn't quite agreed to start yet. The house was quiet, my neck ached, my hand throbbed where I'd cut it earlier, the bandana, now stiff with dried blood. I stood, stretched, and froze. The door to the living room, the one I'd shut the night before, was wide open. I hadn't opened it. I know I hadn't. Beyond the doorway, the hallway stretched dimly toward the stairs. The upper floor looked the same as before, except something glinted in the light. I squinted. Near the top of the stairs, leaned against the wall, was a full-length mirror, wood frame, clawed feet, glass speckled with black rot at the corners. I hadn't seen it yesterday. I would have remembered. I stepped closer. My reflection stared back. Same flannel, same tired eyes, same sleep-matted hair. To when I raised my hand to adjust my collar, the reflection hesitated, just a beat too long, and smiled. I flinched, instinctively stepping back, my boots catching on the warped floorboards. The mirror stayed still, normal now. My reflection moved when I did. No delay, no expression, just me, wide-eyed, and suddenly very awake. I blinked hard and leaned in again. Tiredness, I told myself. I was rattled. Half a second's delay, and a trick of the light could look like anything when your brain's still stuck in that liminal fog between sleep and whatever this was. Still, I didn't like turning my back on it. I continued up the stairs, my boots creaking on each step, the air noticeably cooler the higher I climbed. Not fresh. No, it had that odd, stale chill, like an attic that hadn't been opened in 100 years, and yet the place didn't smell dead. It smelled expectant. I passed the bedrooms I'd photographed the day before. The nursery door was cracked open now, even though I'd left it shut, just wide enough to make you wonder. I didn't stop. My focus was on the last door, the chained one. At first, I thought nothing had changed. The heavy oak still loomed there at the end of the hallway, the iron bands etched with rust. The padlocks hung in place, like dead weights. But something was wrong. The chain on the left, the one I distinctly remembered being pulled taut across the middle, was slack now, like it had been moved, not broken, loosened. I walked toward it, slow and quiet, like I expected the door to react. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Maybe the chain had shifted from temperature changes, or gravity doing its thing over time. But when I leaned in to inspect the padlock, I noticed the metal had been eaten away, not snapped, not filed, dissolved. Tiny pockmarks along the surface, like acid had bubbled it from the inside. I didn't touch it, didn't even breathe near it. Instead, I backed away and turned my attention to something else, something I hadn't seen the first day, probably because I hadn't wanted to see it. There were scratches in the wood, long narrow ones that ran horizontally across the bottom of the door, like fingernails, or maybe claws, had dragged along it again and again. And then there was the sound. It came from the other side, not loud, not desperate, just a tap, then another, deliberate, patient, like someone drumming their fingers against the floor while waiting for you to speak. I whispered, "Why? I'll never know." "Hello." The tapping stopped. Then I heard a sound I'll never forget. It was laughter, just a little, soft, wrong. It didn't come through wood and iron like it should have. It came through bone. It felt like it echoed inside me. I turned fast and stumbled down the hallway, half hoping the floor would give out and drop me back into safety. When I reached the stairs, I looked back once. The door hadn't opened, but the chain was moving, just a slow, subtle sway, side to side, like a pendulum. I didn't remember descending the stairs. Not really. My legs did the work while my brain sat back, humming something tuneless and strange. Back in the living room, I found my gear packed. I hadn't packed it. My tripod was collapsed. The lens cap was back on. Even my notebook was zipped neatly inside my backpack. I stared at it like it might do a trick. "Thanks," I muttered, because what else do you say? It felt like the house was making a decision, deciding if I should stay longer, deciding what I was worth. I didn't want to find out, so I left. I didn't run, but it was close. Out the door, down the porch, through the thick green choke of trees. I didn't stop until I could see the road again. My car still parked, like it had been waiting nervously for me. Inside, I locked the doors. Yes, even out there, slammed the key into the ignition, and peeled back toward town, tires skimming gravel, like they couldn't wait to be somewhere else. Bryson's Hollow looked even smaller the second time, like the buildings had deflated slightly in my absence. I pulled into the diner's lot again, more from instinct than anything else. I needed to get my bearings, maybe ask a few more questions, maybe scream into someone's arms. But when I stepped inside, it was empty. Not just quiet, empty. No staff, no customers, no smells, no clatter. Even the lights were off. There was a menu on the counter, and beside it, my name, written in pen, on a receipt, dated today. But I hadn't been in yet, had I? I backed out slowly, and didn't stop walking until I reached the photo lab I'd seen on the edge of town. It was a tiny, cramped place, with a flickering neon sign. that just read, "Film." Inside, a guy in his 50s sat behind the counter, chain smoking and listening to some scratchy AM radio station that kept dipping into static. I handed him my rolls of film. My hands were shaking. He didn't say much, just nodded, took them, and told me to come back in 2 hours. I wandered town, not really looking at anything. Didn't eat, didn't sit, just moved like something might catch me if I stopped. When I came back, the photos were ready. The man handed them to me without a word, and I knew, before I even looked, I knew something would be in them. I flipped through, parlor, stairs, the nursery, and then there she was, in the hallway, top of the stairs. Not a smudge, not a blur, a woman, tall, pale, wearing a dress that looked like it belonged to another century, hands at her sides, head tilted just a little too far, no eyes, just space, looking directly into the camera, into me. I looked up at the photo clerk, ready to ask if he saw it too, but he was already staring at me, and he said, "She usually doesn't let people leave." I stared at the man behind the counter, trying to read his expression, but he looked neutral. Not scared, not mocking. Just tired, like someone who'd already had this conversation too many times, with too many people who hadn't listened. "She usually doesn't let people leave," he repeated, slower this time. Then he looked down, began tapping ash off the end of his cigarette into a chipped mug, and added, "But I guess you're not most people." I didn't say anything. My brain was still trying to form words that didn't sound completely insane. "She's not in every frame." I finally managed. "Just that one." He nodded. "Yeah, that's when she notices you." Something in his voice, a casual finality, sent a chill crawling down my neck. "You knew what I'd find there," I said. He didn't answer, just gave me a look that meant of course I did, and reached for another cigarette. I took the photos and left. Outside, the sun was too bright. The street looked washed out, like it had been overexposed somehow, bleached of detail. Or maybe my eyes just weren't adjusting well after everything I'd seen. I considered driving back to the motel, but I couldn't face those walls. Not yet. Instead, I sat in my car, engine off, staring down at the photo of the woman on the stairs. I ran my finger over the glossy surface. There was something in the way her body angled, not quite posed, but not random either, like she'd chosen to be seen. And behind her, I hadn't noticed it before, in the shadows near the chain door, barely visible, was something else, a shape, larger than her, taller, wrong, blurred at the edges like it hadn't fully decided how it wanted to appear yet. I slammed the photo down and closed my eyes. This wasn't part of the job. I've walked through collapsed hospitals, dead amusement parks, burnt churches with wind whistling through holes in the roof, but nothing ever looked back at me, not until now. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I even believed it for about 5 minutes, but that night, back in my room, the dreams started. Not nightmares exactly, just strange, slow-motion reels of half-remembered places, a hallway too long, a door that wouldn't stay closed, a mirror where my reflection moved without me, and footsteps, always the footsteps, sometimes soft, sometimes heavy, but always moving toward me. I woke up drenched in sweat. The motel sheets tangled around me like a cocoon. The clock on the nightstand read 3:33 a.m. Of course it did. I sat up and stared into the shadows pooling in the corners of the room, and I swear, just for a second, I heard it. A faint tap at the door, just once, then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat there, ears straining against the quiet. Eventually I got up and opened the door. Nothing, just the empty lot, bathed in cheap sodium light, but on the ground, right at the threshold, was something small and metallic, a key, old-fashioned, iron, with teeth like tiny jagged puzzle pieces. No note, no explanation. I picked it up, heart thudding. The metal was cold, like it had just come from snow. I didn't sleep again after that. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. It wasn't rational, it wasn't safe, but it felt inevitable, like I'd already chosen long before I ever heard of the Holloway house, like it had chosen me. I stopped for gas on the edge of town and caught my reflection in the station window. For a second, I thought it didn't smile when I did. Classic horror trope, right? But I didn't laugh, didn't even try. Back at the trailhead, the forest looked exactly the same. Green, dense, still leaning ever so slightly away from the ridge. But the path was clearer now, like it had been waiting. I didn't stop to take pictures this time. No audio notes, no timestamps, just the crunch of my boots on dirt and gravel. The trees arching over me, like they were listening. By the time I reached the clearing, the light had gone weird again. Too dim for the hour, too golden, like the sun wasn't moving naturally anymore. The Holloway house stood exactly where I'd left it, except the front door was open, just a crack, like an invitation or a dare. I stepped inside, the smell of old wood and mildew rushing to greet me, like a familiar dog. The air was heavier than before, still, but not lifeless, more like it was waiting to exhale. My gear wasn't there anymore, not on the floor, not on the fireplace hearth, gone. But the mirror, the one I'd seen upstairs, it was in the foyer now, propped up against the wall, just inside the door. This time, I didn't look away. I walked up to it slowly, the floor whispering under my feet. My reflection stared back, same clothes, same face, but its eyes were just a little too wide, and its mouth moved a half second after mine did. I couldn't stop staring at the reflection. It felt like a test. If I blinked first, if I moved away too fast, maybe it would follow. The me in the glass wore my shape, sure, but it looked tired in a different way, like it had seen something I hadn't yet, something just around the bend of experience that it was politely not telling me about, a warning in my own skin. Then, with a tiny flick of movement, the reflection waved, a lazy little curl of the fingers. I stepped back so fast, I nearly fell into the hall behind me. A dry laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it, too quiet and too forced, like I was trying to prove something. "Okay," I said out loud. "Okay, not touching that again." The house didn't react, which somehow made it worse. I walked past the mirror and into the heart of the house. This time the living room felt less dusty. The air smelled faintly of smoke, like someone had recently burned a fire there, and there were indentations in the dust on the old velvet couch cushions, like someone had been sitting there, or a few someones. I moved through the space quietly, documenting nothing. My camera remained in my bag, untouched. I knew somehow, I just knew, that this wasn't a place where lenses belonged anymore. Something was awake here now. The hallway upstairs was darker than before, the shadows longer, the paint on the walls seeming to bubble slightly, as if the house was feverish, and yet there was a calm to it, a rhythm, like breathing, in and out, boards flexing with each imagined inhale. I didn't go back to the chained door, not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I found myself drawn to the study on the first floor, a room I hadn't really examined the day before. It had a tall ceiling and rows of empty shelves, their wood warped with moisture. In the center stood a heavy desk, the kind that required 3 people to lift, its surface carved with curling leaves and lion's paws. The drawers were all locked, except one, the bottom left, inside a thick bundle of yellowed paper tied with twine. I sat down slowly, untying the knot. It wasn't writing, not exactly. Drawings, floor plans, the house, but not just the house as it stood, the house as it had been designed, dozens of pages showing rooms that didn't exist, or that I thought didn't exist, whole levels beneath the foundation, twisting hallways that didn't appear on any modern layout, a room labeled only the Echo Room, another marked with a symbol instead of a name, a spiral of thorns, and something even stranger, scrawled across the top margin of the first floor plan, in heavy pencil, always close the upstairs door before nightfall. I stared at that line for a long time. The door, the one that had been chained, had someone lived here long enough to leave that warning? Or was the house just making the warning now, using what it found in my head? Suddenly, I became aware of something behind me. No sound, no breeze, just presence. I turned slowly. Nothing, but the door to the study, which I had left open behind me, was now closed. I stood and crossed the room, twisting the handle gently. It opened easily, but the hallway beyond was different, narrower. The wallpaper was wrong, thicker stripes, darker tones, and the light. It didn't feel like daylight anymore. It felt like candlelight, but there were no candles, just that same golden flickering warmth, coming from nowhere. I stepped through, not because I wanted to, but because I was supposed to. Each step down the hall made the air feel heavier, more aware, like it was reacting to my breath, syncing with my heartbeat. I passed the living room again, or something that looked like it. The couch was in the same place, the fireplace, the rug with the faded red swirl pattern, but now there was a record player in the corner, and it was spinning. No music, just spinning, round and round and round. I don't own a record player. The hallway behind me had vanished. I stood in that room, the silence pressing in around me, like a second skin, and I heard something from upstairs, a door clicking open, not crashing, not creaking, just a soft, almost polite click, like something that had been waiting for the right moment. I turned toward the staircase, and a chill ran up my spine so fast it made me dizzy. There was a shadow on the wall above, long, angled and moving. It passed by slowly, then returned, pacing, just like before, but this time I could hear it clearer, not just footsteps, breathing, my breathing, not in sync, but identical. I backed away from the stairs, into the room, and something caught my eye on the floor. Footprints, in the dust, fresh, bare. They started in the center of the rug, and led directly to where I was standing. I froze, and then the record player clicked. The needle dropped, music crackled to life, low and haunting. A warbling waltz that sounded half underwater, the kind of music you hear in old hotels with no guests. I turned slowly toward the sound, and in the reflection of the glass over the fireplace, there was someone standing behind me. I didn't turn around. Not right away. I stared at the reflection in the fireplace glass, like it was a photograph from someone else's life. Grainy, distorted, half-dreamed. The figure behind me was tall and still, unmoving in the way that mannequins are still, just wrong enough to make your skin forget how to sit comfortably. I watched it. It didn't breathe, didn't shift its weight. It just stood there, watching me through the reflection, its head tilted slightly to the left, like it was trying to understand what I was. No face, not that I could see, just the outline of something person-shaped in a room that had no people in it. I finally turned, and the room was empty. Of course it was. No one behind me, no prints in the dust that weren't mine, but the waltz still played, crackling, looping slightly. I listened closely, and realized it was repeating after maybe 30 seconds, not starting over, just picking up in the middle, like a broken music box with no off switch. I stepped away from the fireplace and into the hallway again, or at least what should have been the hallway, but the layout had changed again. The house wasn't just creaking or shifting under the pressure of time anymore. It was breathing in patterns, rearranging, growing roots in real time. To my right was what used to be the study, but now it was a narrow corridor lined with wallpaper that looked strangely wet in the light. To my left, the living room sat untouched, and ahead, the mirror, back again, this time mounted on the wall at the far end of the corridor. Same tall frame, same warped claw feet, but now the reflection wasn't quite right. It showed me, sort of. I was standing there, but behind my reflection, the room didn't match the one I was actually in. Instead of faded wallpaper and that broken chandelier above me, the mirrored version of the room had black stone walls, like something carved out of an underground vault, and the reflection of me was smiling, broad, toothy, like it knew how this all ended. I turned away again. I couldn't take it anymore, and that's when I heard it, the sound from upstairs, a muffled cry, brief, not scared, just startled, human. I froze. Someone else had come into the house. I found myself moving up the staircase before I'd decided to. Each step bent under my weight, like the house was tolerating my presence, but only barely. The upstairs hallway was darker than I remembered. The ceiling felt lower, the light thinner. At the end of the hall, the chain door stood wide open now. The padlocks and iron links lay in a neat pile beside the frame, arranged like someone had been careful not to disturb them. Beyond the doorway, there was something I hadn't seen before. A second hall, narrow, crooked, slanting downward slightly, as though the house had grown an extra limb, while no one was watching. And at the very end, a soft light, pale, blue-white, like moonlight, through water. I stepped through. The floor slanted more steeply than I expected, and I had to brace one hand against the wall as I walked. The wallpaper here had decayed to a green-black hue. There were symbols drawn on it, in charcoal, circles, inside circles, spirals, broken eye shapes. The air was colder and wet, a subtle dampness that clung to the inside of my nose and made my ears pop. And then I reached the end of the hall. It opened into a room I hadn't known was part of the house, a long windowless chamber. The ceiling arched slightly overhead, ribbed with old beams. There were no furnishings, only a cracked tile floor that sloped toward the center like a shallow bowl. And at the center, a mirror, not the mirror, another one, round, smaller, with an iron frame shaped like vines. It lay flat, like a drain. Then when I peered into it, I saw nothing, no reflection, no light, just a black pool of depthless space. A shiver climbed up my spine, gentle as fingers. I crouched down beside it, not sure why, not sure who wanted me to, and I whispered, "Hello." The echo came back a second later, not from the room, from the mirror, but it didn't just say hello. It said, "Who are you now?" in my voice. Only it wasn't how I sounded today. It was how I sounded when I was a child, 8 years old maybe, before the accident, before my father stopped speaking in full sentences. That voice had been buried in me for decades, but now, it was back, asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. I stood quickly, stumbling back. The mirror pulsed slightly, like a drop of water had hit the surface of something far below, and then the whisper returned. "Not yet, you not ready." The room went dark, not all at once, just a slow dimming, as though someone was turning the brightness down on reality itself. I backed toward the hallway, my pulse hammering, the walls now too close, the air thick like breath from a stranger's mouth. And then I saw it, on the back of the door. I'd come through. Another message, written in the same dark charcoal. "She learns your shape when you sleep." I didn't run. I couldn't. I walked out, slow, measured, like I didn't want to wake whatever else might be listening now. Back in the main hallway, the air felt thinner, not fresher, just less, like something had been siphoned out while I was gone. The colors looked washed, the walls slightly bowed, and the floor creaked under my weight with a sort of quiet complaint. I didn't know how long I'd been in that mirror room. Could have been minutes, could have been days. Time didn't flow the same in there. It pulsed. Still, I needed answers. Something tangible, a thread to follow. So I did what I always do when I'm lost. I retraced my steps, back down the sloping corridor, past the iron-stained walls, and those strange, circular glyphs, back through the threshold that used to be the chain door. But when I stepped into the upstairs hallway, it wasn't the same one I remembered. The doors were gone. All of them. No nursery, no cracked bathroom, just walls, unbroken, seamless, smooth like they'd never held frames at all, except for one thing. At the far end, where the hallway dead-ended into nothing, there was a window. I don't know how long I stared at it. Something about it looked off. It wasn't dirty, exactly, but it didn't seem to reflect light correctly. And the view, it didn't show the woods outside, didn't show anything I recognized, just a long gray plain, flat, empty, and in the far distance, a figure, tall, thin, too far to make out clearly, but absolutely watching, not walking, not waving, just standing there, like it had been waiting for me to find the window. I backed away. My heart had gone still in my chest, quiet and hard, like a fist. As I moved down the stairs, the floor behind me didn't creak, which was worse, because it always had before. The house was changing its rules. Below, in the parlor, the mirror had returned. Again, it was never where I left it. Now it leaned in the corner, half covered by a yellowing lace curtain. And this time it didn't show me at all. Just the room, empty, except for a door that didn't exist. In the reflection, just behind where I stood, there was a second entrance to the parlor, smaller than the main archway, tucked into the wall like it had been hidden there on purpose. But when I turned, it wasn't there, just smooth plaster. I stared at the wall, then back at the mirror, and watched as the door in the reflection slowly creaked open, a narrow gap, just enough, not for someone to step out, but for something to look through. I didn't wait. I left the mirror and moved toward the front door, my boots scuffing the floor harder than I meant to. The door was still open, but the woods outside were wrong, too dense, too tall. The path I'd taken up the ridge was gone, choked with trees that hadn't been there before. In their place was a narrow trail I didn't recognize, winding off into the dark like a vein. I stood there, halfway between leaving and staying, and I heard something, not behind me, not above, beneath, like movement under the floor, soft, steady, like someone crawling through the foundation, brushing against pipes and beams. I dropped to one knee and pressed my ear to the floorboards, and I heard whispering, not words, just voice, not male, not female, something in between, liquid and slow, like breath through water. I backed away, my palms sweating, and then I noticed something carved into the doorframe on my left, a message, so faint it looked like old scratches. Do not follow her voice. Just beneath that, in smaller print, even if it sounds like someone you love. I felt my mouth go dry, because I had just started to hear something new. My mother's voice, calling my name, soft, afraid. Sweetheart, where are you? My mother's been dead for 4 years. I closed my eyes. The house was wearing her, trying her on like a mask. I didn't speak, didn't answer. I stepped back from the threshold, shaking, and turned toward the dining room. Another room I hadn't explored fully. The chairs still lay toppled. The long table bore a thick coat of dust, except for the center, where a single place setting had been carefully arranged. A plate, a fork, a chipped wine glass, and in the center of the plate, a tooth, human, yellowed at the base, still streaked faintly red at the root. My stomach turned, but something made me reach for it. As soon as my fingers touched the ceramic edge of the plate, a door slammed upstairs, hard, like someone was angry, or excited, or both. I spun toward the staircase again, and there just briefly, a silhouette at the top, female, hair hanging like curtains, arms too long, no face, just a smooth stretch of skin, where the features should have been. She stood perfectly still, watching me without eyes. Then she took one step forward, and vanished, not behind a wall, not into a room, just gone, mid-motion, like someone hit a pause button on a scene that was never supposed to play. I backed into the dining room, heart hammering, and sat down hard on the nearest intact chair. My fingers still shook, my skin felt cold and damp, and the whole time, the waltz played faintly from the other room, repeating, skipping, like a lullaby for something that never quite sleeps. The chair creaked under my weight, groaning like it didn't want me there. I sat with my hands flat on the table, the tooth still lying on the plate, like it was waiting to be acknowledged. The dining room was quiet, too quiet. That same unnatural hush settled over everything, a kind of pressure behind the ears, like right before a storm, or like the world was holding its breath. I wasn't sure how long I sat there. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 50. Time moved funny in the house. Eventually, I stood, brushing the dust from my jeans. I needed out of the dining room, out of the house, out of whatever this had become. I stepped back into the hall and stopped cold. The mirror, it was gone again, but now there was a door in its place. The one from the reflection, the hidden one, set into the wall like it had always been there. The paint a slightly different shade, the trim not quite matching. Don't know what compelled me to touch the handle. Curiosity, compulsion, or maybe the house was just done waiting. The knob was warm, not hot, not electric, just skin warm, like someone had just opened it from the other side. I turned it slowly and stepped through. The door led to a narrow stairwell, curving downward like the spine of something too large to live inside a house. The air here was thick and damp, full of the scent of wet stone and old iron. There was no light, none at all, until I reached the bottom, and then I saw it, a single, flickering bulb, swinging from a wire above an open chamber. It swayed slightly, casting long shadows along the walls in rhythmic arcs. The room below wasn't large, maybe 20 feet across, stone floor, concrete walls, and in the center, a well, not a modern one, an old ancient-looking thing, lined with black stone, the rim slick with moisture. Rusted chains hung from a pulley, disappearing down into the dark below, and next to the well, a chair, wooden, stained. Someone had carved a name into the backrest, though the letters were hard to read. Uda. The rest was worn smooth. I stepped closer. The well didn't smell like water, it smelled like earth, but wrong, like something had been buried there too long, and started to remember. I leaned over the edge and whispered, stupidly, "Hello." The response came instantly, not an echo, a voice. I've been here the whole time, soft, familiar. It sounded like me, only tired and far away. I stumbled back from the edge, heart hammering in my chest, every instinct screaming to flee, run, climb, anything. But the door behind me was gone, just bare stone now. I was sealed in. I turned back to the well just in time to see a hand reach over the rim, thin, pale. The nails were long and cracked, The fingers too many, 7 of them. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. The hand disappeared again, sliding silently back into the dark, like it had just been checking to see if I was still watching. I backed against the wall, eyes locked on the well, the bulb overhead, casting jerky light that made the room twitch with every swing. Then I heard it, scratching, not from the well, from inside the walls, first behind me, then beside me, then above, like something pacing through narrow crawl spaces, just outside reach. No footsteps, just claws, tracing paths it already knew. I shut my eyes and focused on my breathing, trying to stay grounded. In, out, just a dream, just a trick, just. The chain above the well jerked, not wind, not gravity, a pull from below. I ran to the corner of the room, crouched low, my back to the stone. Then a voice from somewhere just beyond the far wall. We miss your shape. It wasn't human. It was trying to sound human, but it got the rhythm wrong. The weight behind the words was too heavy, like someone speaking underwater, from a mouth they weren't used to using. I stared at the wall, willing it to stay solid. It didn't. The stone began to ripple, not break. Ripple, like the whole room was made of stretched skin, and someone had brushed it gently from the other side. The light bulb above me buzzed violently, then burst, total darkness, and then the room filled with soft breathing, all around, surrounding me. Different tones, different distances, some shallow, some deep, some slow, some fast, all of them waiting. I didn't scream, I couldn't, I just whispered, please. And from the darkness, something whispered back, you're almost ready. Then the stone beneath me shifted, like a great exhale. And when I opened my eyes, I was standing in the parlor again, back upstairs, midday light streaming through the tall, cracked windows, like nothing had happened. Like I'd never gone below, except my boots were soaking wet, and in my hand was the old iron key, still warm. I didn't remember picking up the key. 1 minute I was in that dark room with the rippling walls and impossible voices. Then I blinked, and the house had spat me back into the parlor like a bad taste. But the key, it was solid, real. Its weight sat heavy in my palm, slick with that cold dampness that clings to metal pulled from deep water. I turned it over, studying the shape of the teeth, old-fashioned, ornate, like something that didn't belong to a door so much as a vault or a tomb, and scratched faintly into the shaft, nearly invisible unless the light hit it right, were 5 letters, Morda. Not a word I recognized, not English, but it felt familiar, not in a comforting way, in that weird dream logic way, where you know a thing is important, even if you don't know why. I pocketed it, not trusting the house enough to leave it out. Then I turned slowly, taking in the parlor again. The light filtering through the windows had changed, cooler now, bluer, like it had shifted from afternoon to dusk, without passing through the in-between, and the air smelled faintly of salt, like sea spray on cold rocks. That was new. I walked to the hallway, expecting more changes, and sure enough, the house had rearranged itself again. The dining room was gone. In its place, a long gallery I hadn't seen before, dusty wooden floors, stretched out beneath faded oil portraits in crooked frames, dozens of them, too many, each one roughly the same size, each one depicting a figure standing in front of the Holloway house. At first, I thought they were all different people, but the longer I looked, they weren't. It was the same figure, just in different clothes, different eras, early 1900s, mid-century, even a few that looked oddly modern. The face was always obscured, by shadow, by angle, by smudging, but the shape, the posture, was the same. Then they were all holding the key, my key. I walked slowly down the line of portraits, reading the small brass plaques beneath each one. No names, just single words: archivist, witness, bearer, heir. And then near the end of the row, one read, Replacement. I stopped, looked closer. The figure in this one wore my clothes, the jacket I had on, the same boots, same key in hand, and though the face was still shadowed, the pose was undeniably mine. I backed away from it, heart hammering. How? When had this been painted? I hadn't sat for any portrait. I hadn't. A whisper tickled my ear. So close. I spun, but there was no one behind me, just the gallery stretching away into the dim. I started walking again, faster now. At the far end of the gallery, I found a doorway I hadn't noticed at first. Low, arched, and framed in the same thorny iron that had wrapped around the mirror down below. Above it was a phrase, carved into the wood in looping, barbed script. Memory is the most loyal haunt. I ducked through and entered a small circular room. It had no windows, no furniture, just a single stone pedestal in the center, and on it, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, old, military style, the kind my grandfather used to keep in his basement, already spooled, already playing, but no sound came from it. I walked closer, only then did I realize it was making noise, but not out loud. Inside my head, whispers, not words, just fragments, memories I hadn't thought about in years. A girl's laugh on a summer road trip, my dad teaching me to use a compass, the sound of my mother humming over the stove, back when she still remembered who I was, and woven underneath it all, like a thread of static, that same strange melody, the looping waltz, faint, familiar. I reached out to stop the reel. My hand passed right through it. No resistance, no contact. The machine wasn't really there. Or maybe I wasn't. Then the whispers changed. They sharpened, started to form phrases. She remembers your name. She's almost found your voice. Don't let her finish the song. I turned and left the room before I could hear more. Back in the hallway, the light had dimmed again. The gallery was darker now. The portraits hard to see, except one, the last one, spotlit, new, still drying, and it was me. Same posture, same clothes, only this time, the face was clear, my face, and I was smiling, but I wasn't smiling now, not at all. I backed away from the painting slowly, like it might come alive if I turned my back. It wasn't just that it looked like me, it felt like me. That strange pull in the chest, that quiet disorientation, like seeing your own name carved into something ancient, but the smile on the painted version of me, it wasn't mine. It stretched just a little too wide, reached the eyes, but in the wrong direction. The way it smiled said, "You're already part of this." I forced myself to look away. The gallery stretched on behind me, like a memory I didn't want to finish dreaming. I needed out, not just out of that hallway, but out of the house entirely. The longer I stayed, the more the rules unraveled. My thoughts didn't feel fully my own anymore. Some of them had sharp corners, some echoed when they shouldn't. I walked fast, not running. Running felt like something the house would enjoy. The front door was still visible from the end of the hall. I could see the light through the glass, only it wasn't daylight anymore. It was a cold blue glow, pulsing gently, like the flicker of an old television in a dark room. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps, above me, slow, measured, and not alone. They echoed like more than one person, or more than one thing. I stopped cold at the base of the stairs, my gaze drawn upward. A shadow moved across the second floor landing, but not from a person, from something taller, thinner, its legs too long, arms that dangled below its knees. I held my breath. It didn't look down at me, just continued walking from one end of the landing to the other, then paused, tilted its head toward the wall, and slipped through it, like it didn't need doors, just the idea of one. The air around me felt brittle after that, like the whole house was holding itself together out of politeness. I turned toward the nearest room, the old sitting room I'd seen briefly on my first visit, but it had changed too. Inside, the wallpaper had peeled back to reveal a mural, A hand-painted scene spanning all four walls. It showed the Holloway house in the center of a vast field. Surrounding it, rows and rows of people, some kneeling, some standing, some half buried in the earth, like they'd been caught mid-sink. None of them had faces. All of them were looking at the house, and above the house, the sky was wrong. Not night, not day, just hollow, painted in grays and blues and pale lavender, like the inside of something breathing. But what drew my eye most wasn't the crowd or the sky, just a small detail in the corner, a window, and behind it, peering out, a woman, drawn in soft lines, wearing the same expression I'd seen in the photograph, hair dark, eyes absent, and she was looking directly at me, not at whoever painted her, not at the scene, me. I backed out of the room, and the air grew colder. Every room I passed now seemed to shimmer slightly, like a film overlaying something else. And I started to notice reflections again, not mirrors, just surfaces, the glass in picture frames, the dark shine of polished wood. They all showed movement, but not mine, always half a second behind, like I was being rehearsed or remembered. In the foyer, I caught sight of myself in the tall hallway mirror, the one I was sure had vanished hours ago. I stopped, because in this one, I looked different, older, hair slightly longer, eyes sunken, darker around the edges, the kind of face you get after being lost too long. And as I stared, my reflection moved without me, just slightly, one eyebrow raising, one corner of the mouth twitching up in something like amusement. Then it pressed its palm to the glass, slow, deliberate. I felt a burn in my own hand, like the mirror had left a mark. I checked, nothing there, not yet. Then something behind me creaked, the sound of a door opening, only there were no doors near me, none that should open. I turned, and the spiral staircase that had once been boarded shut at the back of the house was now wide open, leading downward. The thin draft of cold air spiraled up from the dark like it had been waiting for the chance, and on the wall beside the staircase, another phrase, painted in a hurry, written backward, like it had been meant for a mirror: "She waits below." I stood there for a long moment, not moving, not thinking, just feeling the slow creep of inevitability, like the kind you feel at the edge of a dream you've had before. I pulled the key from my pocket. It felt heavier now, like something was inside it, waiting to be used. I stepped onto the top stair. It groaned beneath my boot like a held breath, and I began to descend. The spiral staircase wound downward, like it had no end, the walls closing in tighter with each step. Dust drifted in the air like ash, and somewhere beneath me, something was humming. A low, almost human tone, like someone singing under their breath from the belly of the house. The stairs weren't consistent. Some creaked, others shifted slightly under my weight, like they were breathing. I kept one hand on the wall, fingers brushing across cold, uneven stone. Not wood anymore, not even plaster. Down here, the house was older, raw, more itself. I didn't count the steps. I didn't look back. Eventually I reached the bottom. A wide chamber opened up before me, the ceiling lost in shadow. The air was heavier, thicker, like it had been sitting in place for 100 years. Stone columns framed the space, each carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals, hooks, eye-like shapes. Some felt vaguely familiar, like things I'd seen in dreams or old feverish memories. At the center of the room stood a massive iron door, 8 feet tall, maybe more, carved with the same spirals as the key. There were chains wrapped around the door, not to keep something out, to keep something in. And as I stepped closer, I saw that the chains weren't wrapped. They were growing from the door itself. I stopped a few feet away, breath fogging in the cold air. The humming grew louder, more voices, a soft, dissonant choir, humming that same waltz melody from upstairs, but out of sync, like they were trying to remember it from memory, and failing. Then something whispered from behind me, "It only opens if you know your name." I turned fast. Nothing. Just stone. But that voice, it hadn't been threatening. Not friendly, either. Just patient. I took the key from my pocket. The instant I held it up, the iron door let out a sound. A moan. Long and hollow. Metal bending. Memory stretching. I stepped forward. The key fit perfectly into a small hidden slot between two spirals. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been meant to. It slid in with no resistance, and the moment it clicked, the chains loosened, not fell, just unwound themselves, like they were exhaling, and the door opened, inward, on its own. No sound of gears, no draft, just open. Beyond it was a hallway, black stone walls, no lights, just the glow of something deep inside. I stepped through. There was no turning back anymore. The hallway narrowed as I went, forcing me to duck slightly, the air growing colder with each step. Eventually, it opened into a chamber, circular, tall. The floor here was black marble, veined with veins of silver, and in the center, a stone basin, shallow, empty, except for a single object inside, a mirror, small, handheld, its surface perfectly smooth. I stepped toward it, my reflection growing clearer, until I realized it wasn't a reflection, not anymore. The face staring up at me was mine. Yes, but older, worn, eyes bloodshot, a jagged scar down the cheek I didn't have, and the mouth moved without mine. It whispered, "She's almost finished with me." And then it smiled, but not at me, at something behind me. I spun, and I saw her. At last, she stood just inside the threshold, not walking, not floating, just there. Her shape was female, mostly, but her form shifted slightly, like her body couldn't decide how to be seen. Her face was a blank field of skin, except where a mouth should have been. That was too clear. Wide, grinning, and humming. That same waltz again, except now I could feel it, vibrating through my bones like a tuning fork. She stepped forward, slowly, feet not quite touching the marble. No eyes, no nose, just that mouth. And as she got closer, I realized the humming wasn't coming from her mouth. It was coming from her throat, an open pulsing wound where a voice had been carved in, sewn into her. I stepped back. She stopped, tilted her head, and listened. Not to me, to the house, to something beneath the house. The walls around us groaned softly, like the house was waiting, wanting. She lifted a hand, long skeletal fingers that moved like they were underwater, and pointed to the mirror in the basin. I looked down. My reflection was gone. In its place, her face, or a version of it, one that was wearing me. Skin too tight, eyes wrong, grinning with my teeth. I shut my eyes, tried to center myself. I was still me. I had to be. The air buzzed, the humming swelled, and then suddenly, silence. I opened my eyes. She was gone. The chamber was empty, but the mirror remained, and in it nothing, no reflection, just black, endless, waiting. And the voice, mine, not mine, came again, soft as breath. "If you leave now, you'll never come back the same." I took the mirror. It was cold, and for a moment, it hummed in my hands, then fell silent, and I turned, back into the tunnel, back toward whatever came next. The walk back through the tunnel was not the same, even though I retraced every step. The walls weren't just stone anymore. They pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, like muscle sheathed in rock. Warmth radiated in slow waves, and the floor gave slightly beneath my boots, like damp earth or thick skin stretched over something deeper. I kept the mirror in my pocket, afraid to look at it again. afraid of what it might show this time. As I reached the iron door, I found it still hanging open, but now, instead of the spiral staircase leading up to the main house, I was faced with something entirely different. A hallway, not part of Holloway House. I was sure of it. It looked like a hospital corridor, white linoleum floors, pale green walls, fluorescent lights flickering, just above headache bright, a faint smell of antiseptic and warm plastic. My brain tried to reject it, to say no, that this couldn't be here, but the floor under my boots was real, cold, solid, echoing. At the far end of the hallway stood a single door, one of those heavy patient room doors, with a small square window at eye level. I walked toward it slowly, each step louder than the last, as if the corridor was getting narrower behind me, trying to force me forward. I reached the door and peered through the window, and I saw a hospital bed, sterile, neat, surrounded by machines, and in the bed, me, or someone who looked like me, at least, thinner, pale, motionless, tubes in the arms, monitors blinking slow, sleepy green. I watched my own chest rise and fall under the sheets, shallow and steady. A name tag hung on the foot of the bed. I strained to read it. Subject hash 333. Status indeterminate. I whispered, "What the hell?" Then the lights above me flickered, once, twice, and every door in the hallway slammed shut at the same time. The sound was like a gunshot wrapped in thunder. I flinched and looked back through the window, but the bed was now empty. The monitors were still beeping, still charting some ghost breath, but there was no one in the room, except me, standing at the foot of the bed, staring back at me, through the window. Only it wasn't quite me. Its face was wrong, too smooth, the eyes glossy like marbles soaked in oil, that strange smile again, like it knew the end of a joke I hadn't heard yet, and its mouth moved, no sound, but I knew what it said. "You left her alone." I backed away from the door, heart pounding like a fist in my chest. Then the lights went out. Total blackness. I stood there for a long moment, maybe a full minute, maybe longer, and then soft light bloomed behind me. I turned around, and I was in the house again, just like that, back in the upstairs hallway, standing at the top of the staircase, as if I'd never gone below, never found the iron door, never held the mirror. Only now, the house was alive. Every wall hummed with a low, rhythmic sound, not mechanical, biological, like the thrum of a heartbeat, too large to fit in any living thing. The wallpaper curled and breathed. The floors swelled gently with every step I took, and the photos in the hallway, they had changed. Each one was now a close-up of the same woman, dark-haired, featureless, the same impossible figure from the mural. The mirror, the bottom of the stairs, only now she had eyes, my eyes, and every single photo showed her staring directly at me. I reached the landing and looked down the stairs, and at the bottom, she stood waiting, head tilted, hands gently outstretched, like a parent coaxing a child to come closer. No mouth, no voice, but I heard her, in my bones. "Come home, come back. You remember how this ends." And I did, not logically, not in a way I could explain, but I knew this had happened before, not in this body, maybe, not in this place, but somewhere deep in the house's memory. The role I was playing had been filled many times. Photographer, witness, heir, and finally, replacement. My knees buckled slightly, not from fear, but exhaustion, the kind of deep emotional weariness that comes when you realize resistance doesn't matter anymore, that you're already written into the story. But something inside me, small, stubborn, said no, not yet. I pulled the mirror from my pocket. It was warm again. Then this time, when I looked into it, I didn't see my reflection. I saw her, but she wasn't watching me now. She was watching herself in some other mirror, in some other loop, as if I had caught her off guard. Her face flickered, briefly, and I saw something beneath it, something old, lonely, wrong, She whispered, "You are the last version." Then the mirror cracked, right down the center, a single fracture, sharp and final, and I felt something snap deep inside me, like a string pulled too tight finally gave out. Behind me, the hallway began to twist, stretch, narrow like a throat preparing to swallow, but the mirror, broken as it was, still pulsed in my hand. One final beat, one last chance. So I did the only thing that felt real. I ran down the stairs, past her, through the foyer, straight for the door. And this time, the door opened. The front door swung open like it had been waiting for the right moment. Unlocked, unlatched, inviting. But outside, there was no porch, no trees, no stars in the sky, just black. Not a shadowed night, not fog, not even void. It was absence, the kind of dark that doesn't end because it never began. Still, I stepped through, because behind me, the house was waking up. The floorboards heaved gently, like the chest of something stirring from a long sleep, and the walls, they were whispering my name, but wrong, mispronounced, like it was being remembered by someone who'd only read it once, long ago. And through water, I walked forward into the nothing, and the moment I crossed the threshold, the door vanished behind me, gone. No hinges, no frame, just seamless dark. I wasn't floating, I wasn't falling, I was simply moving, the way a thought moves, between waking and dreaming. And far ahead, something flickered, a single pinpoint of light, small, distant, but growing. I walked toward it, and slowly, I began to hear sounds, low, muffled static, crackling, then a voice, mine, playing on a loop. If you're hearing this, I need you to listen closely. It was my old recorder, the one I used to bring on solo explorations. I followed the sound until the dark gave way, peeling open like burnt paper, revealing a room, concrete walls, one chair, one table, and on it, my recorder, still running, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. I walked toward it slowly, afraid to hear what I'd left behind. I pressed stop, and silence swallowed the space whole. Then I noticed something else. Photos, hundreds of them, taped to the walls, pinned to boards, scattered across the floor, all black and white, all of me, standing in front of abandoned places. Some I recognized, Holloway House, the Ridge Motel, that gas station in Nebraska with the boarded-up diner. Others, I'd never seen, buildings with architecture that didn't belong to this world, windows shaped like eyes, roofs that bent inward, doors that opened into spirals. In every photo, I was looking directly at the camera, expressionless, sometimes holding the key, sometimes holding the mirror. In one, I was holding nothing at all, but the smile on my face was wrong, like something had taken up residence inside, and hadn't learned to wear me properly yet. I turned away from the walls, and saw the desk. A notebook sat open, full of handwriting. Mine, but the words, I didn't remember writing them. The house only takes what you already forgot you gave. She isn't a spirit, she's a memory that outlasted her own body. Every time we tell the story, she grows back a little. The last page simply read, "You made it to the center, now choose." Below the message were two small objects, the mirror and the key, both pristine, untouched, no cracks, no rust, just waiting. I didn't move for a long time. Felt like hours. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Eventually, I sat, stared at them, and that's when I heard the door open behind me. Not the one I'd come through, another, one I hadn't seen. From it came a soft wind, cold, clean, and a voice I hadn't heard in years. My mother. She sounded younger, before the illness, before the forgetting. She said my name, once, softly, and I knew it wasn't her. Couldn't be. But that didn't stop the ache, didn't stop the pull. I picked up the mirror, held it. It reflected nothing, not even the room. Just that blackness again, waiting. Then I picked up the key. It was warm, and the hum returned, that low, deep vibration of something ancient remembering its shape. And just for a second, the room breathed. The walls sighed inward, the photos fluttered like pages in a windless space. Then everything went still, and I understood. It wasn't about escape. It never had been. It was about choice, what to carry, what to leave behind, and how much of yourself you're willing to forget in order to make it out. I stood there with both items in my hands, the mirror and the key. One reflected nothing. The other opened things I didn't want to find, and yet both felt like pieces of the same choice. The room didn't press me. The house didn't whisper. Everything was waiting, like it always had been. I looked again at the notebook on the table. That final message scrawled like a warning or a dare. You made it to the center. Now choose. I tried to imagine what would happen if I took just the mirror, or just the key, or left both, and walked through the door. But the house had taught me. Nothing was that clean. I closed my eyes and took a breath. In that moment, I thought about everything that had brought me here, all the places I'd explored, the forgotten halls and silent basements, the rot and dust and faded wallpaper dreams. I remembered the first time I set foot in Holloway House, the feeling of the air, thick with memory, the silence that didn't feel empty, and I realized I hadn't been documenting abandoned places. I'd been mapping the edge of something, following breadcrumbs left by something older than the buildings, something that moved through places people forgot, living in the corners of memory, too faint to hold names anymore. It wasn't the buildings I was drawn to, it was her, she who lived in reflection, in decay, in that liminal space between history and haunting. And she had been watching me from the start, maybe from before that. So I made my choice. I slid the mirror into my pocket, left the key on the table. It clicked softly as it settled into the wood, almost like it sighed in disappointment. I stepped toward the open door behind me. Light spilled from it, now brighter than before. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It just was, that strange, sterile hospital light. I stepped through and found myself standing in a hallway I hadn't walked in years. White tile, fluorescent hum. A nurse passed me without noticing, clipboard in hand, Crocs squeaking softly, and in the reflection of a wall-mounted cabinet, I saw myself. Same face, same jacket, same mirror in my pocket. Only something in my eyes looked older, less here, like I was a photograph someone had folded and unfolded too many times. I turned down the corridor and walked slowly toward a door. I remembered room 417. It had been hers, my mother's, in the final weeks. I hadn't come back after the last visit. Couldn't, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew she wasn't in there anymore. Not really, just the shell of her. Whatever spark had made her her was already fading by then. I reached the door, rested my hand against the smooth surface, and for a moment, I could almost hear her humming. That same lullaby she used to sing when I was sick, the one I never remembered the words to, just the tune. 3 beats, then 2, then 1. I didn't open the door, didn't need to. She wasn't behind it, but something was, a memory, a promise, something soft and sad and older than I understood. I turned and walked back the way I came. The corridor was empty now. No nurses, no patients, just silence. I stepped outside, into daylight, and blinked, not just because of the sun, because of where I was. I stood in front of Holloway House, again, only this time, it was boarded up, properly, the windows sealed, the front door nailed shut, thick plywood across the porch, and yellow tape strung across the perimeter, fluttering in the breeze. I looked around. No car, no camera bag, just me, standing where the first photo had been taken, where every photo had been taken, and for a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a dream, a loop, a test, but then I felt it, the mirror, still in my pocket, still warm, and in its faint surface, I caught one last glimpse of the house behind me, not as it was now, but as it had been, lights on, windows clear, and in the highest window, she stood, watching, no smile, just presence, a shape made of every room I'd ever forgotten. She raised one hand and gently touched the glass, not beckoning, just acknowledging, and I understood. I hadn't escaped, not really. I just stepped sideways into another layer of the story, one where she lets me remember for a while before the forgetting begins again. I stood at the edge of the lawn for a long time, unsure whether I was still supposed to be here or if I ever really had been. The house loomed quietly behind me, not threatening now, not haunted, just empty. At least on this side of the story. A pair of crows flapped across the sky above, and for some reason the sight grounded me more than anything else had in hours. Maybe because they were real, or maybe because they'd seen all this before. I walked slowly down the gravel path. It crunched beneath my boots in that familiar, slow rhythm I remembered from my first arrival. It felt like years ago now. The trees had begun to thin, the path slowly leading me toward a clearing where my car should have been, if any of this still obeyed logic. But when I stepped through the tree line, there it was, parked exactly where I left it. Dusty, unlocked, driver's side door hanging open, as if I had just stepped away to stretch my legs. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the top of the door, half expecting the house to change its mind, but it didn't. No footsteps behind me, no sudden fog, no humming, just the breeze, just birdsong, just quiet. I climbed in and sat behind the wheel. The seat felt like a memory too, molded to me, familiar and safe in a way nothing inside the Holloway house had been. And when I turned the key, the engine started, on the first try. No resistance, no warning signs, just the soft purr of a machine, waiting patiently, like the car hadn't noticed anything strange at all. I looked in the rearview mirror. For a second, just a blink, I saw her, in the back seat, not a reflection, just a shadow, watching. But when I turned around, the seat was empty. Of course it was. I pulled the mirror from my jacket pocket, the same one I'd chosen instead of the key. Its surface was still cracked, but only faintly now, like the house had stopped fighting me, or like it was watching to see what I'd do next. And in that shattered reflection, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not the house, not her, me, just me, but different. A little more tired, a little more aware, like I'd aged a lifetime in a few hours, and finally remembered my own name. I put the mirror away and drove, past the trees, past the fence, back down the narrow road that had led me here. And with every mile, the pressure in my head eased, like a band, loosening, like fog lifting from behind the eyes. The radio crackled faintly to life, static, then a voice, mine again. And tonight, we'll be exploring something strange, something forgotten. I shut it off, not out of fear, just done. Somewhere, I knew the house was still there, waiting for the next one, for the next version, because that's what Holloway House really was. A story that feeds on stories, a place shaped by the memory of people who've already left pieces of themselves behind, and maybe now, so had I, because I dream about it. Sometimes, the stairs, the humming, the oil-dark eyes watching me through broken glass, and in those dreams, I'm never alone. She's always there, Not angry, not kind, just present, waiting. And sometimes I swear I hear her voice in places it doesn't belong. The hum of a vending machine, the whisper of an air vent, the static between stations, a tune just barely remembered. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a waltz, always just underneath the world, like she's still singing, and maybe she always will be, because if there's one thing I learned inside that house, it's this: places don't forget people, but they do wait for them to forget themselves. And the moment they do, the door opens again, and the house remembers. So if you're still awake with me now, hey, you made it. Take a deep breath, in through your nose, hold it for a moment, and let it go slowly. There's nothing left in that house for you tonight. The doors are all closed, the whispers have quieted. You're safe, and though the shadows still stretch long behind old places, they can't reach you here. Here, there's only the soft hum of whatever's around you. The fan in the corner, maybe a quiet breeze outside your window, or the gentle pulse of your own heartbeat slowing down. Let it all fade into the background. Let your thoughts drift, like leaves across an old porch in autumn. Let your body settle into the bed beneath you, a little heavier now, but in a good way. You're not in Holloway House anymore. You're home, and even if pieces of that strange journey linger in the corners of your memory, that's okay. They're just stories, echoes, nothing that can hurt you. Sleep will come soon, you've earned it, and who knows, maybe you'll dream of staircases and quiet corridors, of forgotten keys and broken mirrors, but even in dreams, you'll know the way out. You've been there before. You'll find the door, and I'll be here when you wake up. Good night.